Good morning, or I guess good afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. Welcome to another live video on the Authentic Married Woman. I'm your host, Karen Seitz, and I'm a marriage mentor and coach for married women, teaching them how to drop their walls and find their happiness within and finally have the marriage that they always dreamed of. And today I am joined by David Cope, one of the founders of A New Life Center. Always nice to have you, David.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Of
Looking forward
course.
to today's topic. So my name is David Cope, and I'm a founder of a New Life Center with my partner, Peggy Litt. And I got involved in wanting to have a loving and intimate relationship after my divorce in the year 2000. I said to myself, I didn't want to be on my deathbed and wished that I had a loving and intimate relationship. After my divorce, I spent a lot of time looking at myself and wanting to figure out what does it take to have a loving and intimate relationship. And most of the books that I was reading and trying to look at were the things that I was doing in my marriage that didn't work. So after some more soul searching, I realized kind of a da moment that I want to have a loving and intimate relationship with somebody, another person. I have to have a loving and intimate relationship with myself first. I know it sounds really, really obvious to me right now, but when you're caught up in your marriage and you're struggling with feeling like there's no way out and you're stuck and trapped, it's very hard to see the truth of the situation. And what Peggy and I have been doing has been teaching people over the last 10 years, men and women, how to reconnect with themselves so they can build a relationship with themselves, so they can have a sense of feeling that they have self-love and that they find their love within themselves, taking the burden off from their partner of trying to provide that for them. And of course, another obvious thing that we have always learned is if I don't love myself, it's impossible for me to love another. And it really is true, because what happens in our marriage is that we want our partners to fill our needs. And if we can't fill them ourselves, it's like an empty cup and we never get filled up. So the beauty of what we do at a New Life Center is to get to the core issues of why we're unhappy in a marriage. And this is all about women and what they can do to change themselves. And of course, we have programs for men as well. And we're hoping that the women who are listening can see themselves in the work today so that they can empower themselves to change, not to be dependent or codependent on their husbands for their sense of well-being and feeling good about themselves. How is that?
That was great. Very clear.
So what's the topic we're going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to talk about how you can get unstuck in your marriage overnight. And what we're going to be talking about in relationship to that is an area that is challenging for me in my own life and in my own marriage. But we're going to be talking about tough conversations, David.
Great. So can you go review the 3 core principles of our relationship course and our Facebook group?
Yes. So we always like to give reminders so that new members coming in can understand what it is that we're about and what our framework is for what we're teaching. And it also serves as a great reminder for members we've had for a while. And it's always a good reminder for me too, because when things are
Sure.
tough, we forget these things
Yeah.
and we lose sight of what, like David said, what we do have control over. So our first guiding principle is that you are responsible for your happiness, that we all know at some level, we've all heard a million times, if we're being honest with ourselves, that no one and no thing can ever make you happy, that happiness is an inside job, meaning I've got to take responsibility for that and do the things in my life and get to know myself in a way to where I know myself is happy. And then I can bring that into my marriage and it's like magic. The second guiding principle is that the only person I have any control over to change, and the only person you have any control over to change, is yourself. That your husband cannot change you for you, that you cannot change your husband or anyone else, that if you want to experience your marriage in a loving, healthy, happy way, then the first step is to look at yourself
Mhm.
and to work on yourself to change, because that's what you have control over. And that when you do that, and you're with a good man, and we might talk about this in a moment, and you do that for yourself, then he will step up with you and be right there with you, ready to have that happy, healthy marriage. And the third guiding principle is that being an authentic married woman, or just an authentic woman, really comes from having a relationship with yourself,
Mhm.
knowing who you are, and feeling good about yourself. And when you can apply those three principles, and learn how to find those things in yourself and apply them in your life, then you can experience rapid
Mhm.
transformation, not only in your marriage, but in every relationship and every aspect of your life. And so that's why we're here, is to empower you and show you what you have control over, so you can have the life that you want.
Thank you. And what
Yeah.
did you say about a good man that?
Yeah, that so who we are here to serve are, and who we work with are women who know or suspect that they have their walls up, and that they are with a good man. Because a good man at his nature is loving and kind. And what I know to be true, and what we teach the women that we work with, and then they find out it's true too, is that when we drop our walls, it's almost like magic. A good man, he retreats and responds and reacts to our walls being up, which causes the issues in our marriage. So when we can drop our walls and find our softness, which Peggy defines as our strength without fear, and just be who we really are and show up kind, then that changes everything. And your marriage is solvable when you are with a good man.
How come this is? Often the women say, "Well, how come it's on me? Why do I
Yeah,
have to change first? And what about my husband? Why doesn't he have? Why isn't it 50-50? I'll do it if he does it."
that
And
is a,
often that's like, this isn't fair. Like,
yeah,
why is it on me? Why is it on the woman? How come it's not the men's issue?
yeah, that is the most common fight that I had for a long time in myself. David can attest to, when I was learning to apply these things. I was like, well, that's not fair. Um, it comes back to that second guiding principle,
Yeah.
that the only person we have any control over is ourselves. So we teach this not to put it like it's all the woman. It's to empower you. That we have phrases in our culture. This is what I love to use to really help women understand this, and it helped me to understand it as well. We have so many phrases in our culture, David, like happy wife, happy
Yeah.
life, right? Or this one's kind of funny. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And we laugh at those things, and it's all over, our TV shows and our movies, and we laugh because it's true. But where we get off track, and where we get confused, is we think as long as the man is making the woman happy, then they'll have a happy life. But that's impossible, because nobody can make us happy. That's up to us. So when you are able to do that, you empower yourself to be in charge, to be in control of your experience. And good men, in the best way possible, are simple. They're ready to step up. They're ready to be there. So it's really a lot easier and a lot less exhausting if we do the work on ourselves, and we do the work to drop our walls. They're ready. They're ready. And but you have to go first. You have to risk being vulnerable, risk being kind first, to really know that this works. And I think, David, that's the toughest
Yeah.
part
It is.
for us,
Yeah.
because we
Trusting.
have all of our stories and
Yeah. Yeah.
blame. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, good, Karen. So tell me again what the topic is for today.
How you can get unstuck in your marriage overnight. And
Yeah.
in that, we're talking about tough conversations.
And what's the myth?
The myth is that my husband doesn't know how to communicate. That is probably one of the biggest
Yeah.
complaints that I get from the women that I work with, is my husband has no idea how to communicate. He just shuts down and withdraws. He needs to learn how to communicate, and we need to work on our communication skills. And
And the truth is, what we're going to talk about today is,
that your husband is not the one with the communication problems, that that you are the one with the communication problems. And I'm going to share a little bit of my own kind of self-discovery in this area, to help you see yourself in this and to remember that this is about you finding the things that you have control over to
Right.
change and
Yeah.
empowering yourself, not making you bad or wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very important. And then it's normal for
Yes.
what we're going to be talking about for women to feel this way. There's nothing wrong with the women that can relate to this material today. It's very normal, but we until we become conscious of what we're doing, we will continue to think that our husband is the problem or our communication. And boy, you're really in trouble if you think your husband is the problem in communication, because you're not going to be able to change him. The only person you can change is yourself. And if you can see how you struggle with communication and the and underlying issues that's causing you, then you have something to do about it. So, what a great place to start, Karen. Could you share your own awarenesses about um, why you resist tough conversation? And by the way, what is a tough conversation?
So a tough conversation is dealing with your marriage issues without agendas and for the purpose for resolution, that the whole point of a tough conversation is to get to resolution.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about all the angles and ways we come into those tough conversations that take us way off track and we never find resolution.
Yeah. And what did we decide the definition of resolution was?
Yeah, that resolution is when each partner genuinely agrees to change their behavior with respect and mutual purpose. And the mutual purpose in a marriage is to have a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
So when we can keep that as our intention, that as what we're trying to achieve in a tough conversation, then it completely changes the game.
Yeah. So can you give me a quick example of a tough conversation?
Yeah, I would say probably the most common tough
Yeah.
conversation that I avoid and most women and couples avoid is tough conversations about money
Yeah.
and having a budget and even working towards common goals and holding each other accountable
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's something that you have to deal with in your marriage.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. And like I said, coming on, this is that's why I'm going to share some of my own work. This is an area that I push away and I resist, and it's really challenging for me, and I'm going to share why and
Let's
what that is.
let's think about a couple of tough conversations
Mhm.
so the women listening can have a framework. You went away with your husband to a
Mhm.
family for a week,
Yeah, that's
and
coming up.
oh,
Yeah,
that's coming up. What
it's coming
what
up.
tough conversation did you have to have with your husband?
Yeah, so one of the things that my husband and I have been working on for a few years is understanding the importance of each of us having quality time with our own families and not putting the expectation and the burden on each other that we each have to be at every family event. That it's okay to, and actually really supportive and really healthy that I go spend time with my family and that my husband goes to spend time with his family, because how I used to show up is a lot of times, I know this is really common, I would use my husband almost as a buffer,
Mhm.
which prevented me from really showing up and being engaged. And so about a year ago now, a family vacation came into the works with my husband's family. And in order to take responsibility for my happiness and keep my walls down,
Mhm.
the most important thing in that is being true to myself, not doing things from a place of should or obligation. This is what's expected of me. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go on this week family vacation and be there the whole time. When we come from that place, whether we realize it or not, we show up resentful and bitter, and we're not really there. So I knew I had to have a conversation with my husband when this came up of I understand the importance to your family that I go and that we go, but if I'm being true to myself, I know it would probably be best for me to not go and for you to go and be there with your family. And then asking him, how do you feel about that? What is it? If it's important to you that I be there, then I will open my heart and take responsibility for my choice, and I will show up and be there. And it was a tough conversation, David. It brings up a lot for my husband, and that it's sometimes hard for family to understand, well, what do you mean she's not going to be there? And so then he's got to, chat with his mom and talk with his mom and resolve that. So it was important to my husband that I go, and our resolution was that I was going to show up, and that I'm going to go. So that's coming up around the corner.
And that's a very common issue with family. We talked about that during the
Yeah.
holidays and how we often do family events as a should out of obligation, and we become resentful because we're not true to ourselves, or not clear what we really want, and then we become resentful, and it destroys the intimacy and the experience with family.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Sure.
I'm getting to do one more. What's another
One more example of a
of
tough
a tough
conversation.
conversation? Yeah.
Um, well, another one that can come up is a tough conversation around sex. A lot
Yeah.
of times we stop communicating
Yeah.
about sex, and it becomes this big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And we don't want to talk about it like adults.
Yeah.
And it's one that can be done in a constructive way, and it is very important to be able to talk about
Yeah,
that.
that's a good one. That's a very common one. As adults in mature relations, we're very uncomfortable with talking about sex and trying to resolve what our interests are and communicating it effectively with our
Yeah.
partners. So, thank you. So,
Hmm.
all right. So let's go back to why you resist tough conversations. And remember, the purpose of doing this is not to beat ourselves up, but to bring the unconscious conscious, so we can begin to see the patterns that we have, so we can change them. And that as women, if you want to be empowered to make the changes and change and get unstuck, so you're not codependent or dependent on your husband to change in order to feel unstuck to move forward in your marriage, these are some of the things you can look at. Say, okay, do I see myself in the message that Karen's sharing? And if I do, oh my goodness, then okay, that's something I can work on, that's tangible, that might change your marriage very quickly. Because if you can come to resolutions of your issues, they don't start piling up, and you stop being resentful, feeling like there's no way out and you're stuck in your marriage.
Yeah. And what I'm about to share with you is, like I said before, some of my own work to uncover why I resist tough conversations, and what can be confusing for us, like David was talking about, when we look at these things as like, gosh, this means I'm just like a horrible person, or there's something wrong with me. These things were not conscious to me. I had to get the guidance, get the coaching to slow down and be able to go to this place inside of me to find these things
Yeah.
and see these things, so I can actually let them go. Otherwise, this is what's going on underneath the surface that's running the show and making things so much harder than they need to be.
So you have a coach?
Yeah, and a
Oh,
mentor.
who's your coach and mentor?
Well, you. Yeah, David is a coach and mentor for me, and so is Peggy. And
Yeah.
so I'm trained to do all of this work myself, and there's sometimes that I have issues come up that I need the support and guidance to get to these places in myself, because our mind is so powerful, and we're so crafty and so good at
Yeah.
keeping ourselves from seeing the things that are really going on, because these are the things that cause us to be exposed
Mhm.
and feel vulnerable,
Yeah.
which is an experience we fight as humans because it pushes us then to change. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So here's my list: why I resist tough conversations. And again, as I read through this, try to see yourself in this, try to relate to this and see if you can see yourself. I hate conflict. To me, conflict is like internal torture, meaning the most uncomfortable thing to bear. And how I define conflict is it's unsolvable because I'm unable to control my husband. I want things to be even keeled all of the time, meaning steady without conflict. I want to pretend everything is okay. I don't want to change how I show up in my marriage. I don't want to look at myself. And why? Because I will see that I'm not who I say I am. I have a facade of I'm the nice, fair, gentle wife. So if I'm
And
having, or go ahead.
yeah, so when I know you've done a really good job of dropping your walls in your
Mm.
marriage, what kind of person how do you experience yourself with your walls up as opposed to your facade, which is nice, fair, gentle wife? How do
Yeah.
you show up with your walls up
Yeah.
in your marriage? How did you?
Yeah. And I think that brings up a good point too, David, that I think for so long, I just wanted to be there. I wanted to be done with my personal work and growth and just think, oh, I'm there. My walls never go up anymore. I'm perfect.
Yeah,
And the truth is everything that we're teaching, this is a dynamic process. This is a lifelong journey of being true to ourselves and knowing that it's normal that sometimes we're going to put our walls up and that the purpose of seeing these things and knowing what it's like when my walls are up is so I can catch myself
yeah,
and then choose me again
yeah.
because I'm
That's
not choosing
beautiful.
myself
Yeah,
with my walls up.
yeah,
So how I experience myself and how I have done a tremendous amount of work to drop my walls in my marriage. So this is how I used to be all the time compared to now. It's just every once in a while, and then I know what to do to get
yeah.
myself back on track.
Good for you.
So how I experience myself with my walls up is I describe myself as the ice queen. I become very cold, very distant, very prickly and harsh. My husband described it as when he feels my walls up, it almost feels like a thousand knives going into him at once. That's how hard and cold it can feel. Um, I I call myself the nice bitch, where I'm pretending to be nice and innocent and sweet when really the undertone of all of that is very undermining,
Hmm.
very cutting, um, and making my husband wrong. Because I'm not feeling good about myself when my walls are up, I project that onto my husband and make him feel how I'm feeling on the inside, which is weak and small and wrong.
And so, thank you, Karen. That was really well done. And thanks for being so vulnerable in this and sharing uh, to our listeners. So, what's the other side of
Mm,
what's it feel like when your walls are dropped?
yeah.
Because I know that's scary for a lot of women because they don't unconsciously they don't realize they put their walls up as a way to protect themselves because they've been hurt so many times in their life that at some point most women will say, I'm never going to let that happen to me again in a very unconscious way. And so they put their walls up so they're not hurt. But that affects every relationship that they're in with loved ones. And it scares them because the mind says, oh, don't drop your walls. Your underbelly will be exposed and people will take advantage of you. And you've got to have the walls up to protect yourself. And otherwise, people will just walk all over you. And
Yeah.
what's the actual experience of dropping your walls? How do you experience yourself, Karen, in your marriage with your walls down?
So when my walls are down, the most profound experience that I've had that I Peggy always talked about and I couldn't quite understand is I experience myself in my softness, which means I'm kind. I don't have a fear of getting hurt. I know that I have I have myself and that I can face my life, face my marriage, face my relationships without fear, that I can just be myself and that I can be vulnerable and open. And so there's almost just a sweetness and a kindness that I can experience that's impossible for me to get to when my walls are up and I'm hiding behind that.
So just often women feel like their walls are what gives them their strength. That edge is what makes them competitive and pushes them ahead to achieve things in their life. And they're afraid if they drop their walls, they won't have that edge that they feel they need to move forward and be like a, a woman who's achieving things. What happens when you drop the wall? The perceived strength that you get with your walls up. Where does your strength come from when you drop your walls?
Uh, my strength comes from actually being willing to be vulnerable and to I like Brene Brown as a woman we quote a lot, and she often says it's stepping into the arena.
Yeah,
It's stepping in without all of that armor, and because when I've got my walls up and I'm hiding behind that armor, I'm just constantly trying to protect myself. I'm always on guard. I'm always on the lookout. When I drop my walls, I can step into my life and actually really experience all of me and to experience what's happening in my life and run towards it and face it instead of running away from it or just trying to muscle through it and push through, which is where we get that hardness and get that edge that David is talking about. So when my walls are down, there's just no part of me that feels like I need that edge or
yeah,
want that edge because I feel strong just in who I am. I have a resounding belief in myself that I can handle whatever comes my way
yeah.
as me, kind and willing, I guess.
Beautiful. Well
Yeah,
said.
willing. Yeah.
Yeah, nice, very nice, Karen. So we talked a little bit more about um, women who have their walls up
Mm.
um, when they have conversations. So we talked about the myth is that the men are the ones in the relationship that have the communication problems. But when women have their walls up, uh, they can you read what you've been getting from the women that you worked with, how they approach um, tough conversations or conflict with their husband when their walls are up, so they can see why that they need to be working on their communication, because when their walls up, women show up and respond to tough conversations or conflict in what way?
Yeah. So when we show up in tough conversations and we have our walls up, we tend to show up one of five ways, or if you're like me, all five of them at once, in a way of we want to be right. We show up to win. We want to win the conversation, to defend ourselves, to punish our partner, or to get our way. And that's if we're honest with ourselves, it, even if we're pretending because a lot of times I would pretend to show up wanting to have the conversation, wanting to get to a place of resolution, like let's get back on the same page.
Yeah,
When underneath all of that were these secret agendas of being right, wanting to win, wanting to defend, punishing, and getting my way. And there's no room to get to resolution
right.
or to find mutual purpose and find mutual ground if I'm coming from it to coming to the tough conversation with these walls in place
And,
and these agendas.
excuse me, Karen, you found out that this is common amongst the women that you worked with over the years, and Peggy and I working with hundreds of women over the years, that this is a common experience that women have when their walls are up.
Absolutely. I was just talking to a client last night because she was struggling with being vulnerable and having a conversation and helping her to see, well, which was like, it did not go very well. It really didn't go well at all. And I read these things to her and she was like, oh, yeah, I wanted to be right. So if we're willing to go there, ladies, we know these things are in us when we're coming to a conversation, even if we're pretending, no, that's not there. That's not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
If we're honest, it's very palpable when we have these things in us and coming into a tough conversation.
So, what's the goal of the tough conversation? The goal of that is what, and what are some of the things that need to happen in order to have successful, tough conversations with your partner?
So the point of a tough conversation is to deal with the issues that are coming up with in your marriage and
Yeah.
not sweep things under the rug.
Yeah.
Because that's what we tend to do is we sweep things under the rug, pretend everything's okay, put on a happy face, or sweep things under the rug, be bitter and resentful
Yeah.
and stuck in that place. But the whole point is to actually show up to the conversation without agenda to address the issues and come to resolution together. I think the word conversation and
Mm-hmm.
tough conversation is really important
Mm-hmm.
because for me and many of the women that I work with, I'm going to come into it's not going to be a conversation. It's let me tell you,
Yeah.
let me tell you what's going on for me. And then anything my husband has to say, I have a rebuttal for.
Yeah.
Right. And so the word conversation is really important. That you have to come into it willing to have a conversation and willing to guide that conversation to a point of resolution, which resolution is when each partner genuinely agrees to change their behavior with respect. I think that's really important too, that we have to come into the conversation with respect.
Yeah.
And if I'm with a good man and I'm showing up kind and with respect, then that's what I'm going to get back in the tough conversation. If I show up bitchy, wanting to be right, he's going to defend himself and react. And then we project onto them. He's the problem. He's the one
Yeah.
that doesn't know how to communicate. So, again, resolution is when each of us can genuinely agree to change our behavior with respect and mutual purpose. And that mutual purpose is having a healthy marriage.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, Karen, I've been working with women over the last 10 to 12 years. I can hear them saying, yeah, but you don't know my husband. Like,
Yeah.
he's always on attack, and every time I try it, all we do is end up in fighting. And you don't get it. My husband is not like that.
Yeah.
And can you help the women who have that narrative going into their mind? Because that's really common.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
because when we're trapped and we don't have no way out, and we're not responsible for happiness. It's what we do is we project onto our husband as our husband is the source of our unhappiness,
Yeah.
and it's hard for women to tease out, like, you don't know my husband. We argue and he fights and he's nasty, and there's no way that I could ever sit down and have a conversation with my husband. Can you share a little perspective on that?
Yeah, well, once when we have our walls up, what's going on underneath that, like David just said, is we're blaming our husbands for the issues and challenges and the ways that we're feeling because what happens in a marriage, which is really normal, I don't think I've ever had anyone argue with me on this. We all know this.
Yeah.
What happens is, so here's your husband, here's you. What happens is we get lost from
Mhm.
ourselves in the relationship. We get lost in our husband, so we don't have a self.
Mhm.
And from that place, whatever I'm experiencing in me is unhappy and my frustrations and my blame and my issues because I'm lost in my marriage, lost in my husband. How the mind works is I'm automatically going to externalize that and put that on my husband and blame him for the issues. So in that, I have no self-awareness because I've lost myself. So I can't have self-awareness if I've lost myself. And in that, I can't see me. I can't see how I'm showing up with my walls up. I can't see how I'm throwing the first punch
Mhm.
with my walls, and that my husband is reacting and defending himself because he's slamming into those walls, which are very hurtful. Unconsciously, they're very hurtful, and can cause a lot of pain. And so he's reacting to that. And so, well, you don't know my husband. Well, you don't know how things can change until you learn and take that first step and find the courage in yourself to do the work to drop your walls. and it's vulnerable because I have to take that risk of how do I know that that's really going to work? But when I do, then my husband then responds completely differently, and if it being with a good man. So I have to be the one to take that risk, and step in and do that. And as I do that, what's really cool is that then I begin to find myself again. And I begin to untangle myself from my marriage and untangle myself from my husband so I can just be me.
Mhm.
And what happens for me with my walls down and in the process of doing this, I can actually see my husband for who he really is, not my projection onto him. And I can get experience him as kind and loving and see him for all his wonderful traits because I'm not lost in him anymore.
Beautiful. Well said. So, can you kind of give an overview of what we were talking about today?
Yeah, so a lot of times we get really stuck in our marriage because we're not willing to look at the issues and have constructive, healthy, tough conversations to resolve those issues. And we often show up to those conversations with our walls up already in place, and we kind of come at our husbands. We come at them wanting to be right, wanting to punish, wanting to defend, wanting to get our way. And one way to get unstuck overnight is to learn how to have tough conversations and show up in a genuine way, wanting to find resolution, not to prove to your right that you're right, not wanting to win, but to really show up with respect and wanting to find resolution with your husband. And in order to do that, we have to be vulnerable and take the risk and drop our walls.
And can you remind the women as we're wrapping up why it's so scary for women to seek resolution that you realized in your work? Why,
Mm.
why does their mind say, no, don't go there, don't go to resolution? You have to keep it confused. What
Mm.
did you realize at the end of your list, Karen, that why women are so afraid to seek resolution in their marriage?
Um,
What was number,
oh, because I'll see that I'm not who I say I am. I'm gonna have to face myself.
yeah,
When we want to be right, we have convinced ourselves with all of our stories and all of our justifications that I am right and this is who I am and don't tell me I'm anything different. If I'm showing up for resolution, then that means I've got to look at myself. I've got to be willing to look at me, and we don't want to do that because then we're going to be exposed and have to see the things we don't want to see because then we'll have to change. And I know that sounds kind of crazy. Like, why would I get this question all the time? Like, why wouldn't I want to change? That doesn't make any sense. Of course I want to change. I'm miserable. This is awful. But at a profound level, as humans, because of how the mind works, we are terrified of change. One of my favorite comics that I've ever seen was a group of people in front of a judge, and the judge asks, "Who wants change?" And everybody raises their hand. And in the next picture, he says, "Who wants to change?" And everybody's like looking down and up and around. Because at a profound level, we're really fearful of the unknown. We're really fearful of the change. So we all have all these tricks and tactics unconsciously to protect us from that. So if I'm going to go into a tough conversation and look for resolution, then yes, I'm going to have to look at myself. I'm going to have to see I'm not who I say I am, and then withhold my end of the agreement and do the work to show up differently and change. And that's how you can get unstuck in your marriage overnight is being willing to look at yourself, is being willing to see that you're not who you say you are, and then get the help, get the mentorship, get the coaching to change those things so
and
that you can have the life you want.
what myth did we bust today?
That your husband doesn't know how to communicate. And what we're saying, and I know I can hear it too, David, that's not fair. You don't know my husband. You can't know until you step up and you approach the conversation in a whole new way without your walls. And if you are with a good man, yes, he will be right there with you. Good men are
Yeah,
wired to find solution
yeah,
and fix the problem. They
yeah,
want to. They don't want to drag this out forever. They want to get to solution. So if you come in from that angle, then you will be met with that. And tough conversations are called tough conversations for a reason. They are tough.
yeah.
They are not fun. They are not easy. So it doesn't mean it's going to be this pie in the sky, wonderful conversation, but you have to be willing to keep stepping in and be vulnerable and work towards that resolution together.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So if you're listening and you would like to find out how you can start to step into these things, and you've tried the counseling, you've read all the books, you've done all the things, and you're still really stuck and feeling trapped and alone in your marriage, we understand and we can help. So if you are interested in just having a conversation to get really clear on the problems in your marriage and then coming up with a step-by-step how-to plan to fix that, then private message me and we will set up a free 1 hour breakthrough session one-on-one where we'll help you get crystal clear on those problems and how to solve them. And I would love to talk with you. So I'm ready if you are.
Thank you, Karen, so much. It's always a joy to share this with you. I'm proud of you and your commitment to be vulnerable and grow in your marriage and your persistence in working on yourself and realizing that being true to ourselves is a lifelong journey and it's not a quick fix, short band-aid approach. And thank you so much for sharing this with me and to our listeners. And I hope everybody has a lovely day.
Thanks, David. Bye. See you
And
next time.
bye.